mai roto tēnei whare, ka mihi ni ka tātou hare mai ki koro ngā koro, nō reire e whakamongi me timo tēnei wā. Matua tamo wari o tawhunga anei pono, whakapainga e nei e hui, ho mai te piko ora me te marama, tanga mga anō e tautoko ai ni a kanei ai.
Very much, and a welcome from me as well. We have two apologies, Mike Mohi and Alan Dick. Do we have any?
Matu Northcroft.
Oh, Matu, he's also apologised, has he?
And Mike Moy.
Yeah, I got Mike Mohi and Matu. So he's there. We have three apologies. We move the accept the apologies. Second by Councillor Barker. Yes. All those in favour? Aye. Notices. I just want to say something before anyone else has notices. We have a guest coming in at 1 o'clock, and the guest is going to join us for lunch at 12:30, so we need to be really prompt. So in the middle of anyone's long dissertation, I'll be cutting the meeting off. We're going to have lunch at 12:30 so that we keep on track. So everyone could be cognizant of that. I'd appreciate that. Are there any other notices? Uppy? Yeah, Uppy, and then we'll come to you, Tania. Oh, welcome, Tania, on the high tech. You're on first.
I have to call the state at 12:25. I don't want to miss the second one, so I will probably need to sign off at about 12:15.
Okay. That's fine. Yours is okay. We'll call for minor items in a second, Uppy. Right. We'll move to conflict of interest. Any conflict of interests that you haven't already declared? If there are none, which I don't expect there would be, then we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes from the 21st.
I'll move.
Before we move, anyone for accuracy? Then we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Move the minutes, guys. It's not a big deal. We just need a seconder. Paul? We have a seconder. All those in favour of accepting the minutes from the meeting of the 21st? Aye. Against? We accept those minutes. Thank you very much. Right, we'll get to lunch, all right. Follow-ups from the previous meeting. Liz, will you take us through the follow-ups? Or does anyone have any issues regarding or questions around the follow-ups? We are dealing with one of the issues there, of course.
I do.
Yes, Tania? I don't see your hand going up, Tania. You need a little button. Or we move you over here.
It's okay just to move to agenda item number 2. I know we're coming to it later this morning. But just to say that the co-chairs, co-deputy chairs didn't get an opportunity to meet and discuss these changes before they came back to the RPC. It's a shame that didn't happen. No doubt there was good reason, everyone was too busy, but that didn't happen. So when we get into our discussion today, we just need to bear in mind that there wasn't a chance to vet the paper before it came through, so some of the stuff might be a bit I don't propose that when we get into it that we talk about the minor things, but we'll no doubt talk about the substantive. But we probably could have arrived at a more agreeable terms of reference more quickly if we'd been through that process as agreed last time. I'm not sure why it didn't happen.
No, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. It didn't happen. Any other issues on follow-ups? I'm in a bad position here. I can't see everyone. You need to remind me if I missed someone, Paul. Okay. If there anything you want to say? No, everyone's fine. Okay. So we'll move to approve the follow-ups. Fenton, just got your hand up there. Approve. Peter Paku, or second. All those in favour? All right. Thank you. Right, call for minor items not on the agenda. That's you, Uppy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just with regards to the long-term plan, which identified
You want to
some.
put a long-term plan?
No, this is a supplementary paper that we would like to provide to the council, which follows on from the long-term plan, identifying some needs which are included in the submission, and it's based around comparative analysis of LTAs and their relationships with iwi for the ongoing work with regards to capacity and capability building. So it's just some models that we'd like to put on the table
Okay.
to be added to reference and
So what are we
development.
going
in
to
that
call
area.
it? What are we going to call it, mate? Just put it on the agenda.
Let me see if
Long-term plan supplement.
Yep, that'll link the two together nicely.
Okay, Tom.
Oil and gas plan change.
Okay, Paul.
Genetically modified organisms.
Genetics. Tanya, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
I have a subject that's not directly linked to the kaupapa of this committee, but I think it will be of interest, and that is Matariki Reds. Okay. Then we'll move straight to decision line. The first one is
Chair, can I just raise a point of order before we get to a decision-making item, and it's in regard to voting. So can we just get clarity firstly in regard to Tanya? Is Tanya entitled to vote given that she's not here?
I don't know about technically, but as far as I'm concerned, she is here.
Okay, so Tanya can vote. So the other item of clarity I'm looking for is the number of councillors and the number of tangata whenua reps sitting at the table. And as I understand it, if we don't have an equal balance of each, then either a tangata whenua or a councillor has to step aside in a vote.
No, that's not true. What is accurate is that there are equal representation around the table, and if someone's not here, that doesn't mean anything, and Tanya is here.
Okay, so that means that all members present, including Tanya, can vote.
That's right.
Okay.
Any disagreement with that?
Just to, no disagreement, but just for clarification.
say.
Just for clarification, just so when we're looking at this, can you just say what is the voting entitlement of the council as it stands, as it is now? The point that Peter's making, I haven't gone through and checked the absences, but how many councillors do we have present? How many tangata whenua people do we have present?
Absent. One of each.
Okay.
So just for clarification then, Mr. Chairman, so the required quorum is 14 and there are 16 of you present, and for the 80% support for a vote, because there are 16 of you present, the pass mark, if you like, is 13. So that's laid out on the inside page of your agenda every month, just to give you some guidance on that.
Thank you. I think that would be actually a helpful thing for us to do each meeting. It's like a returning officer's report before a ballot's taken.
Okay, thank you very much. Decision items. We'll move to decision item 6, and is someone going to take us through there?
That will be
Tom. Yes, Jenny?
Just a query about the percentage, because there's 75%. Okay. There's just the percentage of voting. So there says 75% here. Liz, you said 80%?
Sorry, Jenny, so 75% is the quorum
Ah.
and 80% is for the
Is the
vote.
voting.
Yeah.
Cool. And the other question is that you just raised for me is the 50% tangata whenua and regional councillors. So I'm just seeking clarity. For any given vote, does there have to be 50-50 present? No. Okay,
No.
that's cool.
No, so the 50-50 is, equal representation is the membership of the committee. Whether or not someone is actually attending the meeting or not is actually irrelevant to that.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
You have to be in the room, and we're saying Tani is in the room.
Yep, kia ora.
You're on, mate.
Thank you, and good morning, committee members. Just firstly, look, apologies. Is Tanya still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we've lost your picture. Look, you are correct. It would have been preferable to have had a crack at circulating this document prior. I will take some time just to sort of take members through the document, because I know it is complicated and it's probably pretty horrible to look at. But yes, you are correct. It was a matter of time, and so apologies on our behalf for not being able to get that out in a week ahead, so that we could crank the handle on it. I just want to start by it's in the paper, just referencing the resolution that was passed at the March meeting, just requesting staff to go away and effectively mark up the 2014 terms of reference with a number of provisos. And I think at the time it probably seemed quite a straightforward exercise, but digging into it and doing the work, it probably threw up a few complexities that added to the difficulty of preparing this document. So I'll briefly talk about how this document is made up. That's in front of you, but there were some instructions to try to present to you what is effectively a vanilla or non-contentious terms of reference. That my understanding is that this, that we are going to attempt today to try and pass and get into effect ahead of the performance review. That's another matter for discussion coming up. So the document is effectively, the document in front of you starts with the 2014 terms of reference as the base document, which is the current terms of reference and the default terms of reference in the event, depending on these discussions. It is, we have amendments and additions that have been incorporated into the document that are required by the 2015 Act, which obviously came into effect after the terms of reference, and there's a requirement in the Act for these documents not to be inconsistent. So it is an attempt to remove any inconsistencies and include anything that's wasn't in the terms of reference that the Act wants to include. There are also additional clauses and matters that have been included in the draft, and that were have been under discussion for some time, and were also incorporated into the document through my understanding some subcommittee workshops, and that was also coordinated through Sainsbury, Logan and Williams, and Lara Blomfield in particular. And then finally, there are some minor editorial edits in the that staff have added just for consistency, and I do believe they're minor. There's nothing substantial in those edits. As you'll see in the document, we've effectively tried to isolate and present to you, because we appreciate that not everyone around this table has had the same amount of input or has had the opportunity to be taken through the document piece by piece. So we have identified in orange aspects that are either that staff are of the view that either step beyond the amalgam of the terms of reference, the 2014 terms of reference in the legislation. So those are what you'd call, the vanilla and base, and also highlighting some of the matters that were discussed as being matters that will be the subject of further consideration out of the review process that's been committed to by September. And so I appreciate that ends up making quite a complicated document, and it's probably very difficult to read and very difficult to make sense of, and probably represents some challenge for this committee to actually vote and progress on it. So what I've got up on the screen here is a table of what staff would recommend as being I suppose, in some respects, the straw man for a resolution to progress this document to achieve the goal of what we call a vanilla change to the update of the terms of reference. Now, I've emailed Tanya a copy just a few moments ago, so she might still be coming to terms with it. And I'm also conscious that I've received a copy of an email from Tanya with some comments on the terms of reference, which perhaps Tanya, I think, probably best discussed into general debate.
Can you just clarify vanilla? So we're all on the same page. Not chocolate.
Plain. It's plain. Vanilla ice cream. Plain.
Clarify. We're all on the same page.
Yeah, so
Light and inoffensive.
what I would describe vanilla as being is effectively the 2014 terms of reference, which is agreed and in place, and can only be amended by unanimous resolution of the appointers. So there's no suggestion that that forms the base of this document, plus the requirements of the legislation that came in subsequently, and plus what I would term as being matters that have been raised in discussion through the workshops that have taken place on the terms of reference that fall outside of the matters raised as being subject to further review through the review of the performance of the RPC. And so, and I can give an example of walking through these, but one example would be some of the discussion around the scope of the functions of the committees, and there are 3 provisions there, particularly that have been in discussion for some time regarding some of the functions that currently kind of sit in the Environmental and Services Committee. And so we're highlighting those as perhaps being non-vanilla matters that will be subject to further discussion.
So vanilla, just so that I'm clear,
about is what is the obligation part of it rather than the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Or
so who around the table knew that before you did his explanation?
we're the only 2 complaints here.
Sorry, do I miss the question? No.
I'm unfamiliar with the term vanilla.
Carry on, Tom.
non-controversial, non-contentious, but I didn't really want to use those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just answer a question, Tom? I noticed you start at clause 3.1.1. Are you going to also go back to clause right from the start? Because I just have some amendments that need to be done right at the beginning of it.
So thank you for that opportunity. It was my next point. I have been provided with an update from a document from Joyce Ann Rehana, which identifies I'm not sure whether it's an issue or a mistake or a preference for Mana Hariri, and to be for references to Mana Hariri Trust to be changed in clauses 1.2.4 and clause 5.1.5.
Yep, that's correct, because it's no longer Manauru Incorporated. It was actually Manauru Trust, so it's not that the name change. It's actually the PSG for the Ahuriri settlement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be suggesting that we incorporate these in these changes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So what I propose to do now is to quickly run through the document and take you through the recommendations that we've got up there. There may be some matters that that staff are taking the view that, and possibly because of the fact that we saw them as being procedural matters that fell out of the workshops and discussions and went through to the document that Sainsbury, Logan and Williams prepared, we might be calling them vanilla or non-controversial, but that's ultimately not our decision to take. So, so. That's correct, Councillor.
Oh,
Tanya?
sorry, if I may, just as we're going through the listed clauses that you've got in your PowerPoint, could we just pause and take any comments after each one, if that would be all right, Mr. Chair? Because I think you could go through all of them and then we'd end up coming back to some of them. So I just wondered if we could deal with them, these clauses you've got listed here, one by one, and then just take any questions or comments on those.
Could I just ask another question? When we had the resolution was that just going back to this problem with these goddamn machines, I'm going to go back to paper. It doesn't switch off on there. At the decision we made was that the Regional Planning Committee agrees with a fully marked up version, etc., for approval, and it's quite clear that it was just recommended by the co-chairs and deputy chairs reflecting the amendments, etc., etc. So we've skipped that part, and you've just said, well, that was difficult, we couldn't quite do it. So I just want to go back and say, why aren't we going to do that anyway? Because that's what we decided to. I don't want to go past this in just without a considered decision as to why we would not do that, because we're jumping that part of the decision. We agreed we would do that. I know that we have missed the gate, but before we carry on going past the gate, I want to know, are we going to make a conscious decision to avoid that? And if so, will this committee make that decision?
So this is this probably comes down to my interpretation of that direction, and I do acknowledge that at a meeting, at the agenda setting meeting for this for today's session, we did say that we were going to try and get this document circulated, but the document that we actually have in front of us now, this marked up version, is the document that has come through from the workshops and the which has fallen out of the discussions, which ultimately led to what I'm calling the Sainsbury, Logan and Williams document. And so I perhaps either correctly or incorrectly took the view that the document that we have here is the document that has been recommended through that process, and so we've brought that document to this committee. Now, what we haven't done is provided the deputy chair, the chairs and the co-chairs and deputy co-chairs the opportunity to review our comments against the document and our recommendations against the document.
Look, perhaps I could add, if the co-chairs and the co-deputy chairs would like to have another go at this and bring back a further revised proposal to the committee, well then we could certainly do so. We did have a discussion about the fact this has been going around in circles for the best part of a year. The issues have crystallised, I think, in the versions that we've got. We now face some reasonably obvious choices about particularly the scope of the committee, and really it's a question of whether co-chairs and co-deputy chairs believe that they can go away and resolve that and bring back an agreed proposition, or whether the choices remain the choices and essentially have to attempt to be resolved at this table. So we take your guidance on that question, really.
Is this a unanimous decision required to alter terms of reference, or is it the 80%?
So it will require a unanimous decision, so effectively this will be, once this committee settles on what it wants the terms of reference to be, It is then to go back to the respective appointers, council on one hand, the settlement entities on the other, for their approval processes.
So that, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but the unanimity is in relation to the appointers. So all of the treaty settlement entity boards and the council would need to unanimously agree, but the recommendation from this committee could probably be an 80% recommendation, potentially, although obviously given that the parent organisations would need to be unanimous on that, it would make sense to reach unanimity here.
Yeah,
so it's a very, very high test that the legislation has set us in terms of making any changes to these terms of reference. Because we could go round in circles on this indefinitely.
That's right, and every decision here sets a high test. Now, I just want to go back. I'm not trying to be difficult here, although I'm trying to be helpful. Although it might appear to be being difficult, but I'm not. And I just come back to the point that you make. This has got to get over a pretty high bar, and it's got some challenging things here. And this paper has got some things which some of us have seen and some of us haven't. Pretty clearly, and we're proposing on the fly here some changes to the paper that's before us. And that makes me a bit nervous. The other thing that I would have thought was, I know we've been lax a bit, but I would have thought, had the co-chairs and the deputy co-chairs come back to the committee and said, we have agreed on this, we would then be in a much stronger position to pass all of those tests. And my concern here is that we don't have we have agreed on this position to put to the committee. And so therefore the debate can therefore start to fray and run each way. So I would prefer to come back if we could do, or come back and say, we have gone through this and we've agreed to this, and we can't agree to that. We don't find a big clarity about it. We've got some muttering going from the three wise people over in the corner there, so should.
We will take a bit of discussion around this in the initial state, Tom, and then Venton.
Well, I would have to say that the chairman and co-chairman of the councillors represented in this committee have not discussed with me my views on any of this. And if I were asked to vote on this today, I would vote against it. So if unanimity is required, 100% unanimity of each of the appointees groups is required, you have a problem. And I don't think I'm the only one.
Venton.
Ditto.
Chair, could I just note that there was indeed a workshop held for councillors on this earlier this year. And look, I'll be frank, for staff we're struggling because there is not an aligned view among councillors on the issues, diversity of views, and there is frankly discomfort with some of the increase in the scope that's proposed in the draft that's before you. And that has to be brought to a head at some point. And I suspect that unless there is a place where all of the committee can get to, where everybody's comfortable, we're going to have this continue to lie on the table indefinitely, because we're not going to meet the test required under the Act of unanimous decision making on any variance. So we will be stuck with the terms of reference as is currently drafted.
May I make a comment?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
And then you.
The key reason I wanted to see the draft terms of reference come back to the chairs of deputies is because this has been such a long and drawn out process. It has now been 7 months since the tangata whenua reps last saw a draft and thought they were happy with the draft. Then the understanding was that councillors would then review it, having reviewed it several times before, and that we would be pretty much done. And then it kind of fell into a black hole for quite some time. And then what eventuated was talk of some concerns around the quorum, around the threshold for consensus, and most recently I've heard some concern around the scope of the functions to include the Environment Services Committee functions. Now, all of that's kind of dribbled out over time, and while I agree with Rick that I think we could have, because there's quite a few small things, Tom, in particular, I think Gavin's done a great job of pulling together a comparison between the current terms of reference and where we are now, because there have been many iterations in between that the working group has worked on. So a very difficult task, and I commend Gavin for his work because it's an absolute headache. But I've spent 5 hours yesterday going through it in detail, and there's lots of minor edits that need to be fixed up to tidy it up, ready for sending to anybody, really. And it's just around use of terms and capitalisation. Now, a lot of that was already dealt with in the previous drafts, but some of that's been missed in this draft that we've got before us. So I think there is a need to sort all those little things out. They're not substantive, but they do need to be sorted. And I don't propose that we do that today. But I do think that it would be really worthwhile actually going through Tom's PowerPoint and hearing from the councillors, because I've only heard it secondhand that people have issues, and it would be really good to understand what those issues are today, given we're all here and the terms of reference are in front of us, and then perhaps let's see where that takes us.
Mr. Chair, I would support a discussion, because when you look at this document, you know, there's lines for everything and whatever, and people need to be taken back a bit in terms of reminding exactly what that, because we are dealing with an act of parliament here. This is not a discretionary thing. There are obligations involved here. And so just reading from the direct off the legislation, like the purpose of the RPC is to oversee the development and review of the RMA documents prepared in accordance with the Resource Management Act 1991 for the RPC region. To avoid doubt, nothing in this Act limits the obligations of the Council under the Resource Management Act 1991 or the Local Government Act 202 in respect of Māori within the RPC region. So we are, as tangata whenua, are meeting with the Ministry of Environment shortly. We want to be able to say with confidence that we are progressing these matters. Now, for me, this is a living document, and I understand we've got lots of business, and sometimes getting your head around all these documents can be problematic, but it is a living document, and I think we should be going with the spirit of it. And if there's anything toxic that pops up out of it, that's the thing we should be talking about, you know. Perfection does not exist in this world, and we could be ploughing a paddock for month after month and putting no seeds in. So you know, this document's been around for a long time, and even if the co-chairs met, as Councillor Belford has said, no one's talked to him. So, you know, let's talk here. Get it over and done with. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Cheers. Yeah, I'm with Tanya and Toro there. At the end of the day, because we all have to agree to what's going on here, I'd really like to know what people are uncomfortable with in this particular document or this particular iteration we've got here, so that we all actually know what everyone's uncomfortable with. As it is, if we were to send it back to the chairs and co-chairs, they would be none the wiser as to what, for example, Tom may be upset about. I'd rather know that now than whilst we're all here together, so we've got an understanding of where we will sit, because at the moment I've got no idea.
So a workshop on this right now could take some time. Are we all happy with that? Neil, you're for doing it now?
Just get on with it, and then what will fall out will be the issues that we need to work our way through. So at least we can clear the decks of all the vanilla and get on to the orange.
Just through you, Mr. Chair. So, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, I realise this has been 7 months in the making, and to the staff of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, I just want to mention that After 187 years, we're still trying to work out how we can work collaboratively together as a country. So you guys have been asked to put into one succinct document a wonderful set of rules which will guide us into the future. And I realise that while I sound slightly sarcastic in my presentation, I want to point out that what you're being asked to do is something we haven't achieved in 180 years. So any comments that I make is more around us moving forward. It is not meant to be in any way a disparaging remark on the work that's been conducted to date. Given the complexity of our history, I appreciate that after 7 months we want to get this done. I'm a little bit to the side of some of the whakaaro that's entered the table this morning. I am for the concept of a working group. I think the complexities in this, yes, where we can knock out the vanilla stuff quite straightforward, but there are some underlying, perceptions and thinking around some of the statements in this document that will need some in-depth, open, honest and challenging conversations if we actually want to get to the end of this mahi. I would advise that this is probably not the best forum to have that level of open and honesty. And if we are suggesting that we can just power out the non-vanilla stuff in a quick meeting today, I think that's an unrealistic interpretation of the work ahead of us. I am, however, keen to see this concluded, and I'm quite happy to support the concept around a working group with some very defined timeframes, so that we can get this to a conclusion, because as far as the tangata whenua is concerned, it's very difficult to engage at 100% here without, and you guys will be finding the same, no doubt, as Hawke's Bay Regional Council, because we're never quite sure where that sits. So the urgency around tidying this up is critical.
Yep.
Kia ora.
I think that's the most sensible thing I've heard all week.
Thank you. It's the only thing I've said all week.
Does anybody want to comment about that or comment about something else? Because I think it would take us, if we debate this issue here line by line, we'll be here till 6 o'clock on item 6. You're just trying to take up his glory, aren't you?
No. It's clearer than I was, but I was heading in the same direction as Uppy. No question about that.
So, okay, is there support for Uppy's proposal? No, what he's saying is a working group. That means sort of three, hypothetically 3 councillors, 3 tangata whenua. That's what you're saying, eh? Yeah, well, you certainly can.
So the reason why I'm suggesting a working group is remaining within the domains of our co-chairs and chair is because obviously there are some of us that would like to make sure that our viewpoint and our constituencies are reflected in that document, etc., etc. I have some concerns as well. And I think a working group will provide us with an opportunity to speed up the process, diversify the feedback that's coming into that, put onto the table terms of reference that we can be mostly very happy with to pass unanimously. And if we do anything less than that, I guarantee that our PSGs are going to send that straight back, because what we send to our PSGs needs to reflect the standard of this relationship, or it's only going to come back, and that's going to create months of delays because we have to compensate for the time frame of those PSGs to get that information through their networks and then back to us. So that's what I'm looking for, a diverse group of people on that working group to be able to, just to build the robustness of it. We're nearly there, really.
Yeah, Neil.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
While I agree with Uppy, I also disagree. I do think this terms of reference and its review started out with one objective, and the objective was to align it to the Act. And that's not a nice to have, that's what we must do. And I think what the staff were trying to do was to identify those matters which were more contentious or required more discussion, that were not strictly aligning to the Act. They were new things. And so I still think it would be useful today, because we haven't had an open discussion, and I don't propose we have to have a detailed discussion, but if people could just highlight what were the clauses they were concerned about, so that when the working group gets going, we're all on the same page with what was the issue that was raised. I think that would be very useful, because as I say, over the last few for the last 7 months, things have sort of dribbled out. And I would much rather hear it directly from people about what their concerns were, just that at least we're all in the picture about what we need to deal with. And then we can determine, okay, well, if those issues are substantive and they're not strictly ones that are dealt with by complying with the Act, which is what we're trying to achieve in the first instance, then we park that for the bigger review. But at least that issue is on the table and dealt with, will be dealt with later.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think I echo Tania's position on this, that we do need, there's plenty of room for the committee suggested by API to consider the substantive issues, and that's the point, is if we're able at this point to spend half an hour or so resolving what those issues are, I think we would make a step forward, and then that subsequent discussion can tease out what the issues are, the substantive issues. But we've got this opportunity to simplify what we've got in front of us, to make that clear. So I'm much more in favour of having, even if it's just to consider whether we agree the vanilla items are vanilla, that would be a good step today.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that? So, Rick?
Can I just say one thing about this? Is that one of the problems we have is how we organise our work. And I do recall us having a meeting where we had the four of us, the co-chairs and the deputy co-chairs. We had what I thought was a pretty robust and useful conversation. For example, we had a discussion about the voting process and how people foresaw it and how we can find some other alternative. It was left for us then to go away and then come back with some other thoughts on what we might have, to some alternatives put up, but we never concluded the discussion. Everybody's looking at their watches and then had to go. Now, I've been to many meetings where we've turned up in a hurry from somewhere else, look at our watch when we get out the door. I agree with Uppy's proposal on this condition, that we set down a day. Come in, whatever time it is, and we only leave when the work's done. No one has to go away at 9:30 or 12:30, whatever it is, and we stay there till we work our way through it. And everybody's invited to the meeting. And if you have something you want to say, well, you turn up and have your say. And then just work through it, piece by piece. And we can do it that way. No watches, no clocks, no pressure. I was thinking, if we're going to do it, if it takes us a long time to get the one day we can all agree on, well, then that'll be much better than what we've got at the moment. An ad hoc intervention here, look at our watches, move on, can't do it. That was, I agree.
So, Rick, are you suggesting that any RPC member could attend?
So this is it, right, this is the day, and make sure...
A serious workshop on this issue.
And make sure the key people are there. If there's 3 or 4 councillors, 3 or 4 RPC, then those are there, and everyone else who wants to attend it.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with Councillor Barker, because the key one to me is that we can set up a working group, like say, of the chairs and co-chairs, but unless they know what the concerns are of everyone else at some stage, that's what's got to come out to my mind, whether it's in this form or whether it's, I'm inclined to think like Councillor Barker, it should be taken offline in that respect, because unless you guys know what the other concerns are, you're getting nowhere.
Any thoughts from town?
I would support the workshop where everyone's invited, because that way the responsibility goes back onto that individual, and whether or not they are familiar with the matters or not, they have to take responsibility. And the reason that's important is that is the basis of why we are meeting, you know, and people need to be clear about what those obligations are. And sometimes I feel as if some members around this table don't understand that fully. And we all don't know things, like even that vanilla stuff. I wasn't clear about what that was about. So, you know, it's a sort of a educational process.
So what we have on the table is a counter to what we're going back to Uppy's. His concept seems to be getting some support. Tania's not there. I'd quite like to, without getting into detail of what everyone thinks about things, we have a concept on the table that we have a serious workshop, everyone's invited, and we thrash this out, because there are big ramifications here on how we're going forward together. Is there, I'd like to go around the table. Is there general support for that? Peter, what's your thought? Okay, Corona? You there? Tom? Fenton?
Yeah, it means that anybody that has concerns about this, it's their responsibility to come along and express it.
Jenny?
Yes, I think it's an opportunity also to. Yes, I think it's an opportunity also to build some of those relationships that are required for a collaborative approach.
Yeah, it's a wider scope, isn't it?
It's a wider scope.
Neil, are you there yet?
I think there's an opportunity to clear the decks of the non-controversial items so that when that working party comes together, they're really focused on the core issues. They're not deliberating on other matters. So I'd be interested just to even just consider the grey areas and say,
Vanilla items,
well, vanilla, whatever they are, and just say, okay, well, are there any issues in there that need
Okay,
to
you're on
be
your own on
taken to that?
Nevertheless, so you're tally on that, Nikki?
I support the workshop and I also support what he's saying.
Okay, so he's,
Yeah, no, we support the workshop because throughout the document we have issues in there in terms of Manauru Incorporated.
So obviously my viewpoint on the workshop's fairly straightforward, but I also support Neil Curtin's comments around there are some items here that could be
you
wiped
want to
out
spend
quickly.
half an hour now on the non-vanilla items? I just don't think you get it done, the non-vanilla,
Yeah, I
because
don't
it'll
think you
smudge
will
into
either.
the other. You're either going to do this in one. Yeah, what's vanilla and what's not? That's in. No, no. Oh, Debbie, what's your thoughts? Sorry, I didn't. You were out when we started going around the room.
And I've been through this many times, this whole document, and I've aired my concerns with Liz and Gavin Ide on different occasions, and I think it's going to go around and round in circles unless you start ticking some boxes off one by one. And one of the things that Tanya said that I respect, I mean, she kind of thought just because the RPC had discussed that, you know, and had things sorted, that it was a box ticking exercise, and I keep hearing Tanya and Tora come and say to us, you know, what are your issues? So I think it's important that they are all put on the table. And the one I haven't heard, I mean, James has mentioned the scope creep, which there has been a degree of discomfort about. And the other issue that I'm wondering when it's going to be raised, it's probably the elephant in the room, but that's whether the independent advisors are internal capacity or external. And that's something that councillors have had many discussions with throughout the long-term plan workshops, and I think that discussion should be shared, those sentiments, with the RPC members as well, because my observation was that there was a general inclination from the councillors to see increased in-house capacity as opposed to external contractors. So there's just another one to throw out, because you're asking for that feedback, but I think we're getting a lot closer than we have been to the solutions at this point in time. So and what I see here, I've gone through that, and I mean, you know, we're striking out 3 boxes and adding and deleting the odd word. I'm reasonably comfortable with where we're at with the changes. I don't like the word vanilla either. It's got there's a movie I've watched lately that anyway, but yeah, so you've got my sentiments. I think shared a bit.
And from the point of view of having a special workshop to go through this, are you there?
Oh, if need be, I'm reasonably relaxed.
Okay. I think there is actually sympathy for us to thrash these issues out and debate them, and need quality time to do that. So that's what we're going to do. I think there is a view around this table. Therefore, this has to lay on the table for that. I don't think we could go through this and look at it issue by, because what some people think is vanilla, other people won't think is vanilla. So I appreciate Neil's point of view on that, to get through some of the easy items, but I don't think there's anything easy in this.
Well, what about page 1?
It could be
No.
page A.
I'm recommending we leave it on the table.
Can I just make one
For a workshop.
suggestion for you as well, for your chair, is that when we have a workshop, could we have the workshop off-site?
Yeah, well, we'll consider that.
I just think it's an added mix. To take people to a different location, different thing, you quite often get a different outcome of it. So I just thought it'd be worthwhile putting that in your thinking box.
Mohaka?
Pink House is very strategic.
Oh, Peak House.
I'll second your motion.
Fenton is seconding my motion. So is everyone clear? Is everyone clear what we have decided here? Well, I've moved a motion that we take this to a workshop. I actually support that view. If it's offline, and we thrash it out because it's more than just a here. It's about our relationship and our partnership, how we go forward on a whole raft of issues. And I don't think we've had the forum to really thrash that out in an honest way. And then that will out of that day will comes the terms of reference. So Fenton seconds that. All in favour? Against?
No.
Tanya, where were you on that?
Well, I came in now for the resolution. So is the resolution to defer discussion and have a workshop instead?
Yeah,
Oh, well, I'm supportive of that.
you're supportive of that. Well, it's
No, you're all wimps, come on.
well, it's carried, eh? We made the 80%.
I just want to note we've still got our in-house discipline.
Okay, thank you. That was a good discussion, and I think a good resolve. So we need to fix a time that's that we can all work with, and we'll come back to you on that and see if we can find a date.
Ask for procrastination.
We'll start off with your thing, though. Item 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, councillors and members of the committee. So the next, if you like, process issue that's of importance to this committee is consideration of the performance review of this committee that's required by the legislation. So I've set out in there the particular clause in the Act that requires that. The first requires a performance review of the committee no later than 3 years after the date of the first meeting, and that first meeting following the passing of the legislation was on the 16th of September 2015. So working backwards from there, we want to start the review process now. There was some discussion with the chairs and co-chairs about what that process could look like. So in part I'm seeking the approval of the entire committee for this process, but also seeking the approval of the committee for the content of a letter to be sent out and which is attached. So the proposal goes like this, that there will be collective feedback from the members of this committee on the performance of the committee. That could occur either in separate hui or, again, in a workshop or hui off-site with all of you there. That's for you to direct us on. But in addition to that, we want to seek the formal feedback from each of the tangata whenua appointers, so the post-settlements governance entities. And to initiate that feedback, I've drafted a letter that is going out under the auspices of the council chair, and it's attachment 1, and it's addressed to each of your appointers, if you're a tangata whenua member of the committee, and really sort of sets out, just very briefly, the background to the committee, how it works, what work the committee has been doing, and at the end asks a couple of questions that we really want to get feedback on. So what I'd like to hear from you is whether or not you support the process, including the timeline, whether or not you think that's realistic, and then secondly, in relation specifically to the letter, what questions you think should be asked around the performance of the committee. There's nothing in the Act that says what the review should cover. It's very much just a review of the performance. So how that is measured and what kind of questions are to be asked is entirely up to you as a committee to detail. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm keen to hear back from the members of the committee about this, and I'm you know, certainly this is a first crack at a letter. I'm more than happy if there's significant amendments to be made, but I really want to make sure that we've got the buy-in of everyone around this table to how the review is conducted and what it covers.
Paul, you're on first. I hope you're not going to comment on the letter, which I
Thank
Tora, you're next.
you, Cheers. No, I'm quite happy with the letter. It's 6. I mean, I'm not going to bloody rewrite the thing by committee or anything. But my question is, we're going out asking the tangata whenua representatives to offer their feedback on how they feel that the RPC is operating. I take it that same invitation is going to be offered to the councillors as well, or is it just the intention, Tony?
No, that's the intent, is that all the appointers, so including the councillors, or council, and so that was really, although I realise I haven't been explicit in the paper about that, but paragraph 3 talks about collective feedback from the RPC members at one or more hui, and that I envisage could well be, for example, a workshop of councillors only, and then coming back together so that every appointer has their opportunity to input.
It's included in the letter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we discussed this maybe yesterday.
Tangata Whenua Group discussed this matter yesterday. We support the proposed review process. We believe the letter to the tangata, well, the letter should be co-signed by both chairs. Probably too much emphasis on the quorum of 80% voting threshold sort of thing that gets into other issues. We recommend more emphasis on seeking opportunities to work together, partnership, etc., finalising the RPC work programme. Possibly include reference to the discussion on the scope of the RPC. And that's something possibly that might come out of the terms of reference review, because we don't know to what extent councils are wanting to seek to limit the scope of the operation. Focus on maintaining and strengthening the trust and confidence between the treaty partners. Noting the Minister of Environment is due to visit shortly to meet with tangata whenua, and we would like to be able to portray our relationship in a good light.
We're going to add on all those things, except we don't have to talk about the Minister of the Environment. Yep. We'll add those things. A good point, and it should be double signed. Noted about that, right? Yeah. Now, who was Tom? Pass. Anybody else? Any questions?
Just one additional thing. If the letter is sent to us in a Word version, we can get our, or the final letter, if it's just in a Word version, we can get it, we can give some feedback on it.
Okay then, if we have no more questions, do we have someone to move the 3 recommendations?
I'll move it, Chair, with one amendment. The recommendation 2, the letter from the council, from the RPC chairs to the tangata whenua appointing bodies and elected councillors, seeking your written feedback.
Yeah, okay. No, we note those changes. It's good to put them in. Thanks, Paul. So the changes are that it's from both, it's to both and from both. Yes, Uppy? We have a seconder. Do you wish to speak? Where was the mover? Who was the mover of that? Paul was. Do you wish to speak, Paul? All those in favour? Aye. Against? It is passed. Thank you. We go to item 8. Oh man, outstanding water bodies, eh? The old perennial. Do I understand that? Can you just take it? Yep.
So we've got Belinda, or is the Tom, you going to?
So, we're going to have a joint presentation from Gavin and
Okay, yeah, okay. So I hope you heard that. We're going to have a joint presentation by Gavin and Ricky.
Thanks, Co-Chair. This paper, as it was presented in your agenda bundle, effectively is a platform for recapping where we're at with this project and providing a platform for the tangata whenua representatives to report back to you, the wider committee, around what may have emerged from their hui held on the 24th of April. So with that said, it's perhaps hand over to Ricky at this point to speak to what happened at the hui and where things might be heading from here.
I've got a couple of slides, but I don't know where the answers appear to. Which is it? I think it's... That one? No, not the middle one. That's mine. Anyway, I think I can just talk to it. So, first point was, as we all know, this has been a difficult process for tangata whenua, the alignment between what are effectively nationally significant values versus, from a Māori perspective, they're very localised significance. For an iwi, it's a local significance to them and their place and their mana whenua versus a national idea. And the same concept failed back in the early 2000s when the government tried to do water bodies of national importance for a similar reason. It's really difficult to do, to balance what's important to an iwi in one place with a national perspective. So having said that, there was agreement amongst the tangata whenua representatives on that point. The next stage was, what do we do about that? Do we participate in the process or not? There was also divergence here. Pahu Wedas decided they don't want to participate in identifying significant water bodies. That's their option, I guess, and they've made that call. The other groups decided they would provide a list of significant water bodies. Is that right? Is that right? Total can speak to that. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Our view is that 80% of the waterways are degraded, and that's where we should be focusing, not on finding something that a treasure hunt where there's no treasure.
Okay. So we've had long and tortuous debates around those points, so I don't want to open that up again. So we have identified a list of water bodies. I've got a list of them on the PowerPoint. They're in our supplementary paper. A number of those have also been identified under the recreational ecological landscape values as well. A number were identified through Belinda's previous cut she did on the C3 process, which is around identifying the literary review stuff and the identification in various documents. So there's quite a bit of crossover on those things. We've put a list of values, we've put a list of rivers up. There's also a list of values we've identified that might apply to those rivers. The next stage effectively is to align those two things together, to say these are the rivers, these are the values that align to that, which is sort of what Belinda's talking about in stage 2. To further the drill down in stage 2 of her work. So that's where we're at. The list is in the supplementary paper that was sent out in the Dropbox papers.
Ricky? Just one correction, I think, just looking at the slide, and Jenny can confirm this, but the Naruroro, Jenny, that was supposed to be the Naruroro in its entirety, not the upper Naruroro, wasn't it?
Hani has asked Jenny you a question. The Naruroro was supposed to not just be the upper Naruroro, but the river in its entirety. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's all fixed, yeah. So that's the list of water bodies. The marks beside them, the star asterisks indicates water bodies were picked up by Belinda in her first cut of cultural values using a different methodology. In the plus mark there is water bodies that are also identified for ecological, recreational and landscape values. So there's quite a bit of crossover between those in a number of places. And that was a list of values that the group came up with at the hui last week on the 24th that would inform what water bodies are of cultural significance. So the next step is, I guess, to plot those against those water bodies and say these water bodies have which of those values against them is the next stage. And that's where we've got to do some more work around that step in the next part.
Just carrying on from Ricky's kōrero, and that's where I have a fundamental problem with the process of the tangata whenua values and the cultural values which have already been litigated and agreed to through our own treaty settlements. The cultural and spiritual values, and they were managed in there. So to go through another filter, and I don't even know what that filter looks like, to re-qualify what we've already qualified through the courts is a moot point to me. And I'm also concerned and confused about the process for this plan change of who requires the next filter and who designed that filter and what purpose does it serve. So yeah, I get to this point and then I tend to go straight to where toro and pāhuera are. Kia ora.
Do you, have you finished your presentation, have you?
Yeah, no, that's it pretty much.
Oh, that's it.
Part of it, I'm not sure anybody understands what the next step, what the outcome of that next step might be. I don't think anyone was suggesting that someone else came in and did a filter of what those values might be. It was really, I think, to Jenny's point, reconciling those things in a piece of paper that says to the council, here's what our values are in each particular water body. It's not necessarily reassessing what they are. It's just we need to record them and make sure you guys have got, your planners have got the right stuff in front of them to help them writing the outstanding water bodies plan change. We had a question around the process, I guess, in terms of, we assumed, I think, obviously wrongly, that the plan change would do the rules and policies and methodologies at the same time as the outstanding water bodies plan change. But now I understand from Belinda that it's a secondary stage and that's dealt with through the catchment management planning process. So that's something to get your head around a bit better, but that was probably our misunderstanding on how that process worked in the next stage of that. But, so that's where we got to, the outcome of our hui on last Tuesday.
Any other questions or challenges? Paul, then you, Debbie.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused because we've got the two papers in front of us, and one's the supplementary one and the one that was in the original packet, and one talks about the outstanding water bodies for recreation, and the other one is the cultural and spiritual values. Yet the lists don't totally marry up. So what have we actually been asked to do here is to drop some off or add some on?
I think
Tom, I was going to go to Gavin for that. But John,
you'll get more sense out of Gavin, but I'll give it a go. I think both papers identify the list that was agreed at the last meeting in terms of the recreational values, the non-cultural values, and it was agreed at that meeting that tangata whenua reps were going to go away and come back with additional recommendations around water bodies that have significant cultural values, and so you probably are looking to the supplementary paper in this regard, and the decision's already been made around the recreational bodies, and we're beavering away doing some secondary analysis on that, and this effectively is the input from the tangata whenua reps on what the list of water bodies to undertake secondary analysis on for cultural assessment is.
So, sorry, Chairs, just as a point of clarification on that, Tom. So what you're suggesting is that there won't be a secondary analysis done on the outstanding water bodies for recreation, landscape and ecological values that are only in the cultural and spiritual list?
No, the analysis is going to go across all water bodies. Now, in some water bodies there are double ups.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're undertaking an analysis of all the, I suppose, the shortlisted water bodies, whether they be for recreational purposes,
yeah,
or cultural purposes.
Yeah. So just to get this clear in my head, for example, you've got Lake Tutera in here under cultural and spiritual values, but not under recreational, landscape and ecology values. But you'll be doing a analysis on both those things for Tutera because they're in one list and not the other?
No.
So you only be doing the cultural and spiritual analysis on Tutera?
If it has been only identified as having outstanding values in that respect, yes.
Okay.
Just a reminder from our hui yesterday, and I emailed to the tangata whenua reps that I wanted the Heretanga Tamatea settlement outstanding water bodies to stay the same. I don't want another filter. I just want it submitted as it is. I don't understand what the other filter and the analysis is for, whether to prove it's culturally appropriate or not. I don't know what the boundaries are. So my intent when I put forward those outstanding water bodies was that no filter, we've qualified it, we acknowledge and recognise its cultural values and significance, and it's referred to, and some of those cultural values, well actually all the cultural values are highlighted in the RRMP, the Resource Management Plan, are in those as well. So I don't want another filter. You asked for the outstanding water bodies on a cultural basis, we've given it to you, and that's how I'd like it left.
I was just going to remind the committee members that if we were to follow that approach and not apply any further secondary analysis to these candidate water bodies for cultural and spiritual purposes, that would go against the committee's earlier agreement that it made back in June of last year as to the methodology of how we go about identifying outstanding water bodies in the region.
Can I just get in a bit here? So,
we need you, Tanya, we need you.
I don't know about that. I don't see the secondary analysis as being a filter. I see it as gathering information to support the nomination of outstanding water bodies, and that research will be very valuable. So what I hear Jenny saying is that she's concerned that the secondary analysis will be used as a tool to eliminate some water bodies. But certainly from a cultural perspective, I don't see that would be appropriate. And the expectation from me at least, and perhaps more of the tangata whenua members, is that we will be engaging in a secondary analysis to gather in the information to support the nomination.
Thank you. Tanya, Debbie?
I'm not sure who this question is for, but so if we've got two mechanisms to improve freshwater management in Hawke's Bay, then can somebody please tell me how the identification of these sites is going to affect or impact on economic development in each of these areas? And I'm just wondering, I don't quite understand how close this is getting to a WCO, so I just need to understand that a bit better. Is that you, Tom?
So the Outstanding Water Bodies Plan change is a plan change to the regional policy statement. It's required under the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management for council to identify water bodies that are outstanding, and this committee has made some time ago a range of decisions around on what basis they would look at outstanding values, and for example, I believe they decided not to look at consumptive values as being a potential candidate for an assessment of outstanding values, and so they're limited to the issues that we're looking at now. What that means once the regional policy statement is updated to include effectively a list of bodies that is found to be outstanding for those values. When we come to do, and so as has been identified before, that doesn't of itself automatically qualify those waterways for any specific special protections. But when we come to do the catchment management plan changes, which are rolling through, of which PC6 is one, Tank's the current one, and so on and so on, when we're doing those plan changes, the fact that a water body in that catchment has been identified as being outstanding makes a requirement on all stakeholders who are considering what catchment management framework they want to, and the wording gets a little bit obscure because we start talking about outstanding and we start talking about significant, but I believe the wording of the NPSFM is that when we're doing that, we've got to protect the significant values of outstanding water bodies. And so when we're doing the catchment plan changes, there's effectively a note, that catchment is on notice that there is a body that they must identify the significant values associated with that outstanding water body, and then they must protect them. And so that creates the high level of protection. So in some respects, if your question is, what is the impact on economic development? Yes, there could be an impact. It could be, there's always a risk that you write a long list now and then you have to deal with that later, but that's the requirement and that's why we're doing it.
I'd just like to introduce a new word. You use the term vanilla, and why it left me with a bit of distaste is that I've been utilising the word homogenising since Don Brash's speech in 2004. So when I saw that all of government policies and frameworks were homogenised and basically whitened up, and Tanya's quite correct, I don't see the point of submitting outstanding water bodies based on cultural values if they will be homogenised and filtered through and viewed against economics. So and that's already highlighted. So I am guarding the fact that I do not want any of the cultural values of the outstanding water bodies nominated, at least by Heretaunga Tamatea settlement, to be homogenised through analysis, through filters, and as usual, we can't actually recognise them at all by the end of the day. So Tanya's quite right in that respect. I still don't know actually what the analysis criteria is, so that concerns me.
Yeah, so look, if I just a few points there. If a water body through this process is found to be outstanding for cultural values, when we come to do a catchment plan change, those cultural values take preeminence in terms of the protections, what the significant values are. So that's, I suppose, the logical point of doing it. I think it's also worthwhile reminding ourselves that, look, and it came up in the follow-ups, a letter has been written to the Minister from the co-chairs, expressing, the incredible challenging nature of this task, and so, we'll look forward to, hearing back from the Minister in that respect. But the process, however difficult or however perhaps in some cases might seem contrived as it feels, is the process that we're obliged to follow. So
just want to, I've been talking to James about these recommendations because we're getting a mixed view around the table. So James, we've got 2 recommendations on the table. Can you just sort of outline the risks we take with these? Because one says that we're not going to identify, and the other says that we'll do a secondary analysis. Well, it appears to me this would not be a secondary, that we've done quite a lot of analysis on this. We've got one of our key partners just walking away from the table already, so they're at number one, aren't they? So what is our risks of just saying we're not doing this?
Yeah, so look, Chair, the supplementary paper updated the recommendations, but look, the initial recommendation, which was let's call it the Ngāti Pahawera option, is that we don't notify we don't go with any cultural values for the outstanding freshwater body plan change, and that would be consistent, I guess, with the concerns that are being raised. Yes.
We are not walking away from it. I mean, if we were to nominate an outstanding water body, it would be the aquifer. Apart from that, we don't think anything else is outstanding in terms of the water quality and in terms of the values. In terms of the cultural values, we consider those a compromise because already there's a river cut in half. How do you cut a river in half? Our view is from the mountains to the sea. The people who are in the upper reaches, they include some of Heneuru, some of Manahuri, and some of Tūwhareto. And there are lots of groups in there that are opposed also to the upper river being included. So all this thing is just causing division amongst ourselves. It's not helpful, and that's why we don't want anything to do with it.
Thanks, Toro. So I suspect that's a pretty good articulation of the inherent difficulties with trying to assess on a cultural basis these outstanding freshwater bodies. And so the option still, does remain in theory to the committee to not proceed with the inclusion of a cultural value test. Well, look. The primary thing is that the council does need to fulfil the national policy statement on freshwater management, and the agreement in relation to Plan Change 5 is to notify a plan change for outstanding freshwater bodies. So we could go back to the original staff advice of last year, which is to notify a plan change for other values, not cultural ones. So that's an option. We will have met the requirements of the MPSFM at that point in time. But we might not have met the objectives of members of this committee and of tangata whenua in the region by not having progressed the cultural value aspect of an outstanding freshwater body plan change. Option 2, I guess, is the one which was put forward, which is the list which has been drafted subject to secondary analysis, and then the third option, which I guess has emerged from today's discussion, is that we just proceed with these without a secondary analysis. And the risk, which Tom and Gavin and Ricky, I guess, have outlined, is that we go into public notification and then hearings and then potentially Environment Court with an inadequate level of analysis to support the water bodies put forward. And that just creates greater risk of them not being successful at the end of the process in terms of achieving the protection status that's sought at the outset. So staff advice would be that secondary analysis reduces that risk to you and does ensure that we have a strong evidential base, as strong as an evidential base as we can to justify the contention. But absolutely understand the point that there would be concerns that that analytical process would be second-guessing the process you've already run by your workshop, if you like. So you need to weigh up the risk of proceeding without that additional analysis, I guess.
Ricky, I'd like you to add to that. Just before, Peter, can I just get Ricky's view on that?
I agree with James. I think it's partly a language thing, and maybe it's not secondary analysis, but it's collecting all the information we need to justify including them, is what I think what we're talking about. I think that's what...
No one's told me what the analysis is about.
So I think that's what I'm trying to do, is to say that the analysis we need for the cultural values is we've got to be able to justify this, probably the Environment Court at the end of the day, or at least in a robust enough form that we can justify the inclusion of that list of bodies. We need that information, and these guys need it to be able to put their hand on the heart and stand up and say, these water bodies should be included for these reasons. That's what we're talking about, I think, in stage 2, because we've got that list and we've got this list of values. We haven't got a piece of paper that matches those things together, which is what we need in stage 2, I think is what we're saying. At the end of the day, the council has to do a Section 32 analysis, which says this is the best way of achieving the outcomes we're trying to do, basically. To do that, they've got to have good information. That's all stage 2 is in my mind. It's not saying, you know, it's not these guys going through your list and saying that one shouldn't be there and shouldn't be there. It's saying, if that one's there, here's the information you've given us that says why it should be there, and we just put that together. That's what stage 2 in my mind is.
Yeah, and so look, it's largely a desktop exercise in terms of literature review of all of the supporting documentation to support the contention that you've put forward that these water bodies are outstanding. And if in the event that the documentation in the view of staff didn't for some reason support any one of those fresh water bodies, we'd certainly be coming back to this table. I mean, this table will be signing off on a final plan change before going to notification in any event. So this is essentially to garner further advice from staff on the list that you've drafted, and you'll have an opportunity to receive that advice, and if you're not satisfied with it or you want to explore it further, then we could do so at that point in time.
Can I just ask a further question? This is probably one of the most frustrating things that I've been involved in all my time on the council. We've spent more than $100,000 trying to identify outstanding water bodies. In my view, we've got absolutely nowhere. We're hearing today that there are a number of tangata whenua folks sitting around this table who don't want their water bodies to be part of this even. And you know, then we're going to go into a plan change which is going to cost another $150,000 to achieve what? Is it possible for us to just go to the government and say, look, we've gone round and round in circles on this, we've spent a lot of money, we can't get agreement on what the outstanding water bodies are, therefore we're not going to submit any. Can we do that?
So, look, the letter to the Minister, which has been prepared for the co-chairs, is precisely to raise that concern. It's not so much the government that's our worry here, it's local stakeholders, particularly Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, that is expecting a plan change, which came out of the Plan Change 5 hearings for this purpose. So, and we undertook that we would do so. So we would be reneging on an undertaking. We tried to keep this as practical as possible by setting aside cultural value tests because we knew it was going to be extremely fraught for all the reasons we have explored and discovered. But there was a desire by the committee to include cultural values. We've now been on this journey and we've spent considerable resources on getting to this point. And so I guess the pragmatic thing is, do we close the deal pragmatically on the list which we've got, do the secondary analysis, come back and see whether we can get across the line, or do we continue to have an existential discussion about the merits of this policy and whether or not we want to walk away from the policy and adopt some other approach which would invariably involve negotiations with Ngāti Kahungunu and the other parties to the Plan Change 5 decisions, which include a bunch of NGOs, including Fish and Game and Forest and Bird, etc. And those conversations about us not progressing an outstanding freshwater body plan change could be very difficult indeed and could take quite some time. So, yeah, I look, understand what the council is raising, but we're at a point now of just trying to close this deal and move on.
So we're hung if we do and we're hung if we don't.
Well, this isn't going to be a perfect outcome.
Can I make a comment, please? Look, I feel we're going around in circles. I appreciate the viewpoints of everybody because they've been eloquently expressed at previous meetings. But where we got to was that we were going to write a letter to the ministers, so that's being done. And then the other thing we were going to do was to nominate these water bodies. And while there is some concern, as has been expressed by councillors about this process, nonetheless, there are a whole group of tangata whenua representatives who have nominated water bodies, and I would like to see those be progressed. And I just want to come back to your comment, James, about that will be a desktop exercise. That will not do justice to the nominations, I'm afraid, because we've already had a desktop exercise which has been undertaken by Belinda, and she's pulled together some good information about the water bodies. but we're probably going to need to dig a bit deeper because some of these water bodies didn't even feature on that list, I don't think. So there will be something more than a literature review required to gather in information to support these nominations. So I just wanted to flag that, and that's probably a discussion for after the three. Should we choose the second resolution or second option, which was to support the nomination that's been put forward by those tangata whenua that want to do that, and to conduct the secondary analysis.
Tony, am I taking that you?
If we're at that stage.
I'm taking that you would support the second option.
Yes, the second option.
Would you move it?
Yes. So the second option, I'm just being clear, is the one numbered 3. And,
Agrees that the following list of candidate outstanding water bodies will be subject to a secondary analysis.
I'll move that.
I will second that. Tani, do you wish to speak? Do you wish to speak any more to it?
No, I just want to see us get on with that.
I don't wish to say too much, except the fact that I completely sympathise with Parawera's view and Jenny's view also that none of us want to say that our water body is not outstanding. I mean, I live on a tributary to the Karamu, and one of my objects in my life, if not the main object in my life outside my family, is to fix the Karamu. Bigger than the other things around the council, really. And it's a disgrace, and it's not outstanding at all. So I noticed it was up there in some reference to it. So we all have rivers and and streams that we're connected to, but we've got to move this process along. And I think council, from our chief executive, from Ricky, and from other people around here, is that let's just move this along. It isn't going to be perfect, but it is getting closer to where we want to be. And we've had a lot of discussion on this. If we just go back to square one, I just don't think that's the place we want to be. So I'm really happy to second this. Are there any other speakers?
Just one part.
How are you writing a letter? You're writing a letter about your concerns. You shouldn't be seconding.
Yeah, we're in debate here. I like his technical advice. What you say, Chief?
I'm ignoring the co-chair. Jenny.
My concern is the analysis, because I have not, and I know it's possible to do a really good, robust cultural analysis, because we were presented one yesterday. We were presented with one yesterday. In fact, they cover the majority of the water bodies that Heretaunga Tamatea settlement would put up. And my concern is they haven't even got an airing with the Water Tank meeting. So we had a presentation given to us on the cultural values analysis done for Tank, on the cultural values, and I thought it was a superb analysis of cultural values. So I know it can be done, and if there was any way that I could get that sort of robust analysis, which the Regional Council have supported to attain, then I would feel confident and comfortable at the rest of the process. The current, or the previous process that has been used up to the state, it is not robust, and it murders the cultural values. So I know that there's the ability and the capacity within council to do that. And so this or that is not my concern. I would gladly put those outstanding water bodies up if I could utilise the current cultural analysis already being provided and just extend it to the areas that fall outside that. So I know it can happen.
Thank you. Happy?
So my comments are more around some perspective. So from Tātou to Wairo's perspective, as been mentioned before, we consider all of our water bodies significant, so trying to determine one from another is problematic. However, we recognise that this is a mechanism provided for us by central government, and it provides some advantages to a select number of water bodies, and therefore is worth pursuing and working proactively with council to try and identify those water bodies so that at least some of those are covered by this particular mechanism. Where I'm finding some difficulty in achieving some outcomes to help us accelerate this process is that, again, from a historical perspective, so many times we have been asked to put forward information, whether that be cultural values or whatever, and then a third member or party has whittled that down through a different lens, and the whole process for tangata whenua has been completely undermined. So as a consequence, there's a high level of caution coming from our PSG and our marais around continuing to engage in these spaces, because we have that historical perspective around we don't want what we consider to be cultural values determined by us whittled down and reassessed by someone who has no real perspective of those values, and then in turn to put them down into a document which is used to refer to develop plans, etc., etc. So the challenge for Wairoa is that unfortunately central government has given us some really poor markers around building this space, and we're spending a lot of our time running in circles. So while I appreciate Ngāti Pāhauera's kōrero, and we also support that, from Wairoa's perspective, we are looking to use this particular mechanism to whatever advantage we can for the catchment area, so long as Jenny mentions, that the cultural values are not compromised through that process.
Any other speakers? We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? How many? Oh, we're going to have a show of hands here. So we have 2 against. It's carried. Motion is carried.
Just on that matter, I don't want to be picky again, but the Chief Executive did make mention of a court case. The Chief Executive in his presentation did make mention of a court case that drives a lot of this work. I did ask to be directed to what the court case was, so I could read it for myself, and I've yet to have that. So could that be forwarded to me?
Yes, I thought it had been. So yeah, plan change 5. Yeah, no, we'll chase that up.
I don't like getting down to all of that.
Okay, I don't know. I think we've moved on from water bodies. Thank you very much, guys. Ricky?
Well, I'm just pondering the question then, because obviously I don't agree. Well, no one has given me the confidence of the analysis. The second filter, I'd have to withdraw then, wouldn't I? I have to withdraw the outstanding water bodies that I put up, because they would be conducted to the second filter that I have the issue with.
Chair, so the issues raised by Jenny, I didn't respond to because obviously we were in debate at that point in time, but I'm happy to provide some comment now if you wish. So really pleasing to hear the level of satisfaction with the work that's been done around the tank cultural values assessment. We're led by Joella Brown and as you note, funded by the council, so that's great. We've put a huge amount of effort, obviously, into that because we've got a comprehensive catchment-based plan change for tank, and that level of analysis and effort will certainly occur in relation to all of the catchments we do henceforth in terms of the plan changes. The challenge we've got is putting that level of resource across all of those water bodies in this process while also doing the catchment-based plan changes. You've noted that we've got the capability to do it. Yes, we haven't got the capacity to do it, and that would need to come back to the work program, which is on the agenda for later for this committee to fundamentally reconsider whether or not for the outstanding freshwater bodies you would like that level of resource supplied and that level of analysis to each and every water body, which would blow out both our timeline and the level of funding that we'd need to put into the outstanding freshwater bodies, and obviously that timeline is also tied to the tank plan change. So we're trying to balance everything here, and the outstanding freshwater bodies has been a reasonably heavy commitment of one staff member for nearly 2 years, and I guess the question is whether we now load further work onto that for each and every water body.
Thanks for that analysis, James. Jenny, I think before you do that, you probably, I don't know, need to go back to your Hita Takatini group, wouldn't you, and say, do they want to withdraw subject to that? I don't know whether Peter would have a view on that because he voted for it. But I think...
We're voting on this number 2 part of it.
Yeah, number 2, yeah. Yeah, anyway, we've passed a resolution and we achieved the required voting level to do that, and not always happy. Sometimes we lose, and you have to consider your what you do from there. But we're moving on. We're moving on, Jenny. So we have item 10, tank plan change pathways. We have half an hour. Can we do that in half an hour? So, is that Tom or was that, who is that? Tom? This was a good paper.
Just an information item updating committee members on the progress of tank and our current expectations of how we will bring tank to this table, and how we will give committee members an opportunity to get their heads around what is obviously quite a large and significant piece of work. At the last tank meeting that we had originally programmed for there to be one more tank meeting in May, and then a sort of a final wrap up in June. We've agreed that despite quite a significant amount of work that's been done by the group in January, February, March and April, which has progressed a huge amount of policy and involved a huge amount of work, that we feel that time frame is going to be too tight to give the tank group members time to go away and reflect and perhaps have discussions with their own their various constituencies around a draft plan before bringing it back to this table. So it's we have decided that it's and we've discussed this at the last tank group meeting, to push effectively the tank timeline out by a couple of months to give all the tank members some room to breathe in some respects, and for us to tidy up a number of other matters. That's been agreed by the tank members. So what our current intention is that we, if we hold to this timeline, that we anticipate that we will be bringing the draft plan to this committee in early August, and we are in discussions currently with the Treaty Partners group at the tank table, and interested in feedback here on whether there's a preferred or formal process. We think there should be a process of formal handover, because the tank group was effectively constituted by this committee, and so we're sort of seeking guidance at first instance from the Treaty Partners around the tank table on what that process might look like. Then we're proposing at this stage 2 workshops, whereby a first workshop will be where we take the committee through the detail of the plan, the reasoning for the plan. We'll try and provide as many of the experts that have been available to the tank group to be here to answer questions. We appreciate it's a Herculean task, and but we will try and we're working with the independent advisors, try and frame up probably a very intensive workshop where we walk you through the plan change and what it's trying to achieve, and why decisions were made, and what evidence those decisions were based on. Then we're also proposing that we will conduct on a separate day a field trip where we can actually go around and see on the ground some of the issues that the tank members discussed and dealt with, some of the examples of things that need improving, and in some respects some successes that have already been achieved ahead of the plan change. The terms of reference for that this committee has set, or has mutually been agreed between this committee and the tank group, does require this committee to give tank group an opportunity to consider any changes that this committee wants to see in the plan, or review any decisions that this committee has taken where the tank group have been unable to reach a firm consensus. So the process will obviously involve a loop back through the tank group members after the August workshops, and then come back to this table for effectively debate and progression of the plan change, leading into the notification process.
Thank you, Tom. I thought it was a very good paper. Questions for Tom? Oops, sorry, I can't see you down there. You have to yell.
Thank you. Just through you, Mr. Chair. Tom, I'm just looking for some clarification. I'm very happy with the paper and the recommendations going forward. What's the rationale behind the porphyry for the formal handover? The formal, to make it formal. Okay, all right. So, and you're seeking input from the tangata whenua representatives around the porphyry? Was that what I heard in your?
Yeah. So at first instance, it's a ball we're tossing to our treaty partners around the tank group table, and I'm assuming either they or we will be discussing that with tangata whenua reps around here. So we're absolutely happy to receive guidance.
I just want to comment. I when I read this paper, I personally like that, because as Tom pointed out, this tank is set up by this committee. This is a committee of the RPC, and they've done a huge body of work, working with mana whenua, working with all the stakeholders, and I think we should recognise and respect their body of work by formally receiving it. So I like that idea. For Tom?
Yes, I've got a question. Given the amazing report and presentation that we got yesterday, it saddened me to hear that they haven't been able to get an audience with the wider tank to present to them. So then that leads me to concern around the fusion of the cultural values across the tank plan change, because there needs to be an opportunity for the tank whole, I would have thought, to work through that. Hopefully in a better way than we've just gone through with the outstanding water bodies. No, it's all about process. Determines how you feel when you get to the end. So I'm just wondering when, and Joella did say that they were struggling to get time to present the cultural values. In fact, they've attempted to for a few times. So my question is around, will that occur? And will that be reflected in what we see in the plan change? That whanaungatanga between the groups.
So Joella's brief, as I understand it, for this particular piece of work, we're working, we're using our best endeavours to work closely with the treaty partners group in the drafting of the plan change, and they are probably, look, and we acknowledge we're asking a lot more of them than anyone else to effectively review, pore over the plan change and see that it is actually reflecting the values that they want acknowledged through that plan change. Joella's task was, in some respects, to make sure that, and I think in many respects it came from a comment that Tanya made of wanting to see line of sight between the cultural values that have been expressed and the plan change, and making sure that those values have been acknowledged and accounted for through the plan change. So that's the reason behind that document. So I'll have to take offline the comments around whether they've been struggling to get those views expressed at the table, because the purpose was to make sure that the draft plan, as it has been written, is actually reflecting those documents. So it'll come through the. So hopefully we're wanting to make sure that they're embedded in the document that you'll see.
And the key I'll be looking for is that I can recognise it, because I've already seen it in its raw state. But it's actually about having the opportunity to talk with the wider tank members on the tangata whenua cultural values. And so that's, I suppose my quandary is, how will we see that infused across the plan change if there has not been an opportunity for the wider tank group to discuss those cultural values?
I don't know what this presentation was yesterday, but I've been on the tank group since 2013, 14. There have been multiple presentations of values predating my participation officially as a councillor and postdating my participation as a councillor. So I'm flabbergasted, frankly, that somebody would make an assertion like that at this stage of the game. If I, as a member of the tank group, came forward with a proposition that I think, I don't know, growing peanuts was the best path forward for the Haratunga Plains, I would get my day in court before the full tank group to bring in my slides, make my presentation, have my day, have my case made. And I'm not trying to minimize this at all, but I'm just saying it's stunning for me to hear that members of that task force, that group, that have been representing Maori interest in this whole process have not been heard, or even feel that they have not been heard. I must be on a different committee.
I'm just passing on the comments.
Neil, Peter, he's a tank man.
Exactly what Jenny is saying is why a month ago, after our workshop, we went to the Tai Whenua. I've been hearing that all the time from various people and the public. So that is why we all went down there to hear what was going on with the group that the council is talking to. Not so much what the tank in itself is talking to. Who is the tangata whenua? Who are the treaty partners? Because there is a lot of talk out there and it's not very nice. So Tom, I'm not belittling anything you said. It is the very reason. They don't speak in the meetings, they abstain from voting. I'm horrified when I do attend and sit in an observation. And I try and do that every time we're not doing our treaty work. Yep, so kia ora.
We doing questions? Yeah. I just want to, if Tom could help me with, I'm assuming the workshop under Section 8, I'm assuming, but you can help me there, water values, information and knowledge, Mataronga Māori. Where in the workshops or throughout the process will we see the outcomes discussed and identified? So the anticipated environmental results, where will they feature in this program of work?
So they are fundamentally represented by the plan change. By the document itself is the outcome.
No, I'm talking about the specific measuring of measurements that we're going to use to evaluate the effectiveness of the plan change. So I'm wanting to know what measures are going to be utilised and when they get discussed. So I'm assuming it's either state of the tank catchments and therefore measurement, or water values information and knowledge. So if I wanted to know what the anticipated environmental results of this plan change are, which of the workshops would I go to?
That workshop. Because, I mean, the plan change...
Which workshop?
There's a 2-day workshop. There's 1-day workshop that is going to... The first day is effectively a walkthrough of the entire plan, which will...
Was that an answer?
Well, the plan will be providing, you know, identifying the issues, the objectives, the measures that are required to achieve the outcomes. So they'll be inherent. It's inherent through the entire document. If you, I'm not sure, are you talking about an implementation plan as to how we want to things like, or what the actual attributes, what the desired outcome states are?
So is there a, we've got a regional resource management plan which specifies anticipated environmental results that are to be achieved from the plan. So I'm wanting to know, is there a section in the workshops which explicitly discusses and identifies and distills what they are?
Yes, they will be, and the plan change obviously represents a change to the current RRMP, which has outcome states, so there will be changes to those outcomes as a result of the plan change. So where the group has said, for example, that it, you know, that it needs to, that it's going to set water quality limits, or set allocation limits, or set you know, trigger flow limits, they are all throughout the document in terms of those outcomes.
So I need to go to all, I need to attend all workshops to get to that point, is that what you're saying?
There's only one workshop.
Oh, it's only one workshop, so
Covering the 4 areas.
4 areas, okay.
Okay, Toro.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got some concerns about that part in terms of the recommendation. We are governors, and as such, we should get a succinct report with all the details and all these measures. I like Mr. Curtin's thinking in terms of having those things that we actually need to consider and what the measurement is in terms of making the decision. So what we need is a succinct report in terms of this whole tank thing. I only envisaged the presentation to be a half a day, and the going around and having a look at the sites maybe in the afternoon, but I haven't got 2 days to waste on these issues. They are important, but we've got a lot of important issues to deal with, and we need matters presented to us in such a way as we can make good decisions. That's what we're here for, make good decisions, not get involved in all the nitty-gritty parts.
Tom.
Just a slightly different view. I would say the field trip is gravy. It's a nice to have. I think there are, just limiting it to the big issues in this plan change will require, I think, a substantial amount of time.
More than a day, Tom? More than a day?
Well, I mean, given the amount of time we seem to be able to devote around this table to rather minor issues, when we put 10 or a dozen major issues all embedded in one plan in front of this group, I think it will take some time.
We might be better on majors than minors.
And I would suggest we might need the 2 days for actually the substantive discussion.
Can we just pause on that? Do we, what are other people's views on that? Do we need 1 day, well, Toro said half a day, is it half a day, 1 day, or 2 days? He's right, putting aside 2 days, this is major, of course, for Heratonga especially. Anyone's got thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We live in an age of technology now. You know, we can have a good video. You know, take a half an hour, that's it, all done and dusted, instead of roaming around on buses, having sandwiches and all the rest of it. You know.
Peter, you've sat through the tank. Can we do this in half a day, 1 day, or do we need 2? No, if we, yeah. So you need 2 if we include the trip. Your view is 2, and you've been at every meeting. Anyone else got views on that? 2 days?
But I need to leave, my apologies.
See you.
Are you 1 or 2 days?
I like site visits.
What's that?
She
She
likes
likes
site
site
visits.
visits. She likes site visits.
So 2 days.
Yeah, well, we have to find a date that works for everybody. But it looks like we are settling on 2 days.
We can rent you our
So,
drone if you like.
do we have someone to move those recommendations then, as they stand then, with the 2 days still in? Fenton, will you move? We have a mover. Uppy will second. Fenton, you wish to speak?
I'll just briefly, Chair, I think you will need the 2 days, but I'll just receive and note the tank plane change is the recommendation. It's got attendance at a 2-day workshop. I've just been talking to Councillor Belford. There's still a couple of meetings to get through yet before it gets to us, and that will crystallise as it comes through. It may be 1 day, it may be the full 2 days. This is just giving us a bit of a heads up what it looks like. So,
But we leave the 2 days in the recommendation.
well, it's as it's receive and note. I'm happy with that.
Uppy, do you wish to speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? Peter?
I'm absolutely in support of 2 days. I can't believe that we would be able to crystallise 5 years of work into half an hour. It's just not going to happen.
He didn't say half an hour. He didn't say half an hour.
I said a video, a site visit.
Order. Okay, are there any other speakers? Councillor Barker, you want to speak?
I'm just being guided by the meeting.
Yeah, are there any other speakers? Are we going to move the motion to the 1 and 2? All those in favour? All right, against?
Yeah.
He only wants half a day.
This formalism we get into, you know.
It is passed. It is.
Inefficient.
It is passed by majority. Thank you. I think we're going.
I'd like to note that Coral is the most advanced of all us here. He wants us to move to a virtual reality world.
We have a drone that I could lease this lease the emails.
I don't know.
You're right. Yeah, at a chip.
Okay, we've got 15 minutes. Can we get through item 11? We can. Okay, we're going to take item 11. So, James, can you? Oh no, Gavin. Where is he? Or Tom? Tom, you take. Oh, Gavin. You're going to take it as read, Gavin, are you?
No chance, Gavin.
Okay, Gavin,
Okay, so
give us the
this
purpose.
item 11 has got 2 limbs to it. One is our regular resource management project update, which comes to this committee every second meeting. One thing I want to draw to your attention in that part of the paper is in relation to the oil and gas regulation workstream. Now, as you are probably aware, last month the government, or certainly the Prime Minister and Minister of Energy and whatnot, made some announcements that effectively sound like they're closing their door on further new offshore exploration across the country and limiting onshore exploration permits to only those within the Taranaki region. We have chased ministry officials to try and get some clear documentation to that effect and understand what the policy is or what the background material is for those decisions and those announcements by the Prime Minister. We have come up pretty much empty-handed, even as late as yesterday. So, for now, we're in a little bit of a hiatus with our own work stream on this oil and gas plan change. It seems a little bit, from a project manager perspective, it seems a little bit premature to, or no, not premature, seems a little bit reckless to charge on and continue spending money using our consulting resource while we're at these sorts of crossroads, and the government's announcements is only relatively fresh. So what we're proposing is coming back to you next month, hopefully with a bit more knowledge from the ministry officials around what the government's policy package actually is, and presenting you with some options around what we could do with our own oil and gas plan change work stream. Off the top of my head, those options could include carrying on as is, could involve disestablishing this entire work stream as we know it at the moment, or it could mean that the issue of oil and gas regulation gets folded into a future piece of work such as the Regional Resource Management Plan review, which is on our books anyway. So that's just foreshadowing 3 simple options that we're likely to paint a picture for you at the next committee meeting in June.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. So aside from the oil and gas, which we're not going to go into a debate on at the moment because you're going to do that next month, and Tom's going to talk about it anyway later on the day, are there any other questions as relating to this RMA planning projects update? You do have one?
Yes, several actually.
Several. We've got 10 minutes.
Well, it takes as long as it takes, Mr. Chair.
Well, we'll be...
Gavin, thank you for the time.
I
we've spent.
knew.
Have I got the floor, Mr. Chair? Thank you. Gavin, thank you for the time we spent considering this matter. It was greatly illuminating. I just want to, can I go to your paragraph 8 in your report, in the agenda paper? And you've said there, while both the 2004 and 2018 effectiveness review reports had identified a number of matters, can you just tell me one matter it identified, please?
That's an example.
Perhaps I can help anticipate
one example would be in terms of the Regional Resource Management Plan provisions around air quality. One of the anticipated environmental results talks of a register of complaints. Within that existing complaints register, the data sets that we have and the way we hold it it's challenging to identify the number of premises, individual premises, that are the subject of complaints as opposed to the number of complaints in totality. That's just one example that immediately comes to mind.
Well,
and there would be a story to tell behind
Sure.
the total number of air complaints and also the number of individual premises who are the sources of those, instigators of those complaints.
Perhaps I could help with the 2004 report. The report has found there are information gaps which made it difficult to adequately assess the effectiveness of the environmental results in the regional policy statement. So a generic issue around information generally. But can I go to your table now on page 55, which is your spreadsheet of activities? And I appreciate the sequence there. Can I just clarify, you identify 9 there, rest of regional plan review. Is that the Regional Resource Management Plan, the RRMP, you mean?
It is, and just bear in mind that the Regional Resource Management Plan is a document that has the regional policy statement in it, and also provisions, regional plan provisions for land and water that is not subject of the coastal plan. So it's a combined document, yep.
So I can read regional plan review as RRMP review, is that?
Well,
I was looking for the RRMP review and I couldn't find it. Is that where it is?
RRMP review would equal rows 8 and 9 combined.
Okay,
and as you run your eye across those 2 rows, you'll see that the green coloured cells are one and the same.
So that commences in 2020 and is expected to be completed by 2025, is that right?
That's the intention, yes.
Okay. Yep, that's fine. So in total then, from the initiation of the RRMP, before we get measures, it'll be 25 years. From 2020, from 2000 to 2025, there'll be 25 years before we actually input measures that were identified in 2004 as being absent.
Can I just perhaps help here, because it's not just items 8 and 9 which are reviewing and updating the RRMP. All of those items from 1 to 9 are changes to the Regional Resource Management Plan. So we have a rolling schedule of upgrading the Regional Resource Management Plan in various aspects. And so some of the issues that were raised in 2004 have already been addressed in Plan Change 6, for example, or Plan Change 5, Plan Change 4. And so we've been making upgrades to the plan in response to some of the concerns raised in those effectiveness reviews along the way. We'll continue to be doing so across the range of plan changes we have in play now. And the one down there at number 8 is the RPS. So the RPS will be up for review at that point in time, and then it's all residual matters at that point in time in item number 9. So,
now, I appreciate what you're saying, Chief Executive, but the report, this report doesn't say that. It says quite the contrary to that, that there are measures and gaps still not there. So what I'm interested to know, it's a deliberate decision to delay or to sequence the adjustments or amendments, but I'm wanting to be clear that we're making a deliberate decision not to have a comprehensive evaluation of the measures until we've completed this exercise by 2025. That's okay if that's what we're doing, but we need to be clear that that's what we're doing.
So just to clarify, there are measures that I would expect that will be upgraded in relation to the tank catchments as part of the tank plan change.
Well, that's my point. That I asked the question earlier with the earlier item is when specifically will the tank process produce the outcome measures that we're after? And what I'm wanting to ask Gavin in this process is, amongst the if you like, the activities we're doing, I'd like to see a timetable of the measures when they're going to be introduced. So it's, if you like, a sub-table of what's been produced, and that's, I think, is missing in this.
So there will be some measures or limits that are specific to water quality within the tank catchments, and it's natural for those to come through in the tank plan change as the vehicle for that. There will be presumably some more generic anticipated environmental results or monitoring parameters that apply not just within, say, the tank catchment of the Mohawk one, but across the entire region. And it seems appropriate for the RRMP review process to be the vehicle for those to be introduced and refurbished.
I totally get what you're saying. However, what I'm not seeing is a timetable where those, and we've got the Regional Resource Management Plan objectives and policies, of which there are, I think, 5 or 6 major categories. And I'm asking the question, when will we correct or implement measures which identify, close the gap identified in the report? The 2004 report, 2014 report, and the 2018 report identify those things in each review, and we haven't done anything. Well, we've marginally done things to correct that, and I'm wanting to know when will it be completed.
So if you're talking about a completion date of all of those existing anticipated environmental results being refreshed, refurbished, yes, your reference to 2025 being the intended conclusion of the RRMP review would be that calendar year. Yep. There are going to be some numerous opportunities between now and then to refurbish other elements of it for sure. Yep.
I'm happy to I asked this at the first meeting I attended. around the RRMP, and I can't see anything scheduled over the Māori dimension, the 1.5, 1.6 through at all. So 25 years is a long time to wait, but it's not even indicated. So is there any intent to review those policies? And I look at 2.4 that gives, reviewing it to give effect to the RPS, so is there any intention of including that at all? I understand your budget. That was my last meeting, was told that the budget's tight, so I can't see it in the plan.
So reference was made to page 55 earlier. And certainly the chapters of the RRMP that you referred to just then, Schedule 1 and Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, would certainly be a feature of Row 8, the Regional Policy Statement Review.
Can you, I need to translate in my mind, I don't understand what you've said.
The region.
So the cultural and the Māori dimensions are included in Section 1.
Yes, which is part of the regional policy statement.
Yes.
So that's a bit
That'll
that will be
happen in-
reviewed under row 8.
Okay. That'll happen in 2020.
Starting happening in 2020.
Starting to happen in 2020 and take 5 years. I'm just mindful of the fact that would there have been any considerations to the legislation that brought this committee together to perhaps review it in context to this earlier? And,
No,
and is there any way to progress that to happen?
Well, it goes back to this question of whether or not the approach of this committee is to have a work program which is catchment and community based, because the regional policy statement sits at a relatively high generic level, and the choice therefore is whether or not you wish to redevelop both or one or the other. The choice taken to date is to focus on the catchment-based plan changes, and obviously responsiveness to tangata whenua is a key part of all of those current plan changes. Incorporating tangata whenua values, the things that you were noting before, is coming forward in the tank plan change. So we're doing that in a spatial sense at the moment. And so the choice by the council was to do it spatially specifically, catchment by catchment, and then at the end of all that, come back and look at any gaps and wrap up, if you like, the rats and mice around the outside of the RRMP, anything which didn't come through those catchment-based plan changes. And if there is a desire to, at this point in time, change that approach, then we'd need to come back to you with a fairly fundamental revisitation of the resource allocations and the plan change program.
Okay, so see, that's my version of homogenising. I can't recognise anything in any of the plans, the outstanding water bodies plan, the tank plan. I can't see this. And look, if I look at the 2015 Act for this committee, it's about the purpose is to improve tangata whenua involvement in the development and review of the documents prepared in accordance with the RMA. So then I go to the RRMP, and I want to know how effective the relationship is and the cultural values. So I'm just trying to identify when that's going to be relegated some time and resource. If we're going to be part of all the plans, it will not give the due diligence that it should be given with the act of this committee and the RRMP as I read it.
Well,
I'm just wanting,
so
how can we progress
with respect to outstanding freshwater bodies, we've taken a decision to include cultural values, and a whole bunch of work has been done to try and accommodate that, so they are reflected with respect to our outstanding freshwater bodies. Within the tank plan change, considerable resourcing over the last 5 years, considerable engagement, considerable effort is being undertaken to, in effect, evaluate how effectively is partnership being given effect to in the tank catchments in relation to land and water management. A whole bunch of issues raised, values raised, identified, and planning provisions, so policies, methods, rules, are all coming forward to respond to those concerns in the tank catchments. So there is a considerable body of work to give effect to both the RMA provisions that you cite, the intention of this committee with respect to the RRMP, and there are existing provisions in the regional policy statement which highlight the importance of the partnership with tangata whenua, etc. So it's not as if the existing RRMP is inadequate, but you rightly point out that where is the evaluation of the effectiveness? Well, that evaluation is happening at catchment level with the communities of interest, and that's the way we've chosen to approach it, rather than have a entirely parallel regional conversation, which I have to say would look a lot like an outstanding freshwater bodies cultural assessment, a regional conversation with all regional tangata whenua around the effectiveness of our partnership. We would then have to reflect that somehow into a revised regional policy statement. That would then need to have a plan change process which involves hearings.
Is that a no then?
No, the answer...
Is that a no?
The answer is the way that you had characterised it, which is basically all or nothing, which is we're not doing it, we're not fulfilling, I don't think is a fair reflection of the huge body of work and effort that's going on. The approach that we're taking, as I reiterate, is a catchment and community-based approach as we go around the region, not trying to attempt to do this in one fell swoop across the whole region. And if
I'm not encouraging a process that you're purporting that I am encouraging. What I'm asking is a simple question about reviewing this effectiveness, because I'll tell you what, the catchment by catchment and community by community process is not felt or experienced or believed to occur for the tangata whenua of the Heretaunga Tamatea settlement. Now, I don't have to be at the meetings of last year to know that. So I suppose I'm just trying to effect change that the beneficiaries of the Heretaunga Tamatea Settlement Trust can feel it. If we talk about communities, catchment by catchment, we're marginalised straight away. And by that marginalisation, we're also, the treaty status is marginalised yet again. So I am, I'm fairly focused on process, an equitable process, and a process that maintains, I suppose, the integrity of the beneficiaries that I'm here for. Because at this point in time, it's not effective at that level. So for this point, when we talk about the effectiveness review of the RRMP, I'm asking the question, when will we be participating in that role of, is it as good for us as it is for you? Because at the moment, it doesn't feel that way. So I'm just asking the question. And if it's a no, that it's not going to be looked at and it's not going to be budgeted for, I want to know. And then I can work from there with our constituents.
So you will be asked that question in relation to the Heretaunga catchments in the next few months, and your deliberations about the adequacy of the recommended plan change from the tank group will be all about that, I expect. Does it give effect to your view of treaty partnership? Is it responsive to your needs? Does it meet the statutory tests? You will be asking all of those questions, and I certainly hope the investment made over the last 5 years will give you a satisfactory answer. And I'm slightly with Councillor Belford on this, that I'm just almost cannot believe that after all the effort that we've gone to, we're still hearing so much dissatisfaction. But on the other hand, we're also hearing that the work that Joella's done and presented yesterday was a great piece. So it's a slightly binary story. Certainly, there's been a lot of effort to try and ensure that this plan change gives effect to it, as will the next one and the next one and the next one.
Can I just say two observations here. Firstly, it's not unreasonable for some people to say they know nothing about what's going on tank, because they haven't been participants. I think what we've got here is sort of a mismatch of the structure and the process and people's perceptions. This is what it is, and so someone to legitimately say, I've got no idea, I'm a bit marginal, I just don't know. Well, that could well be, because the people who have been participating in the tank process on their behalf are still doing the work and haven't reported back. So as long as all this joins up at some point, I think we're okay. And I don't think we should get ourselves entirely stuck on the fact that some people aren't cited as well on this as they could be, because that's just the nature of the process. When you have delegations to do things, the delegate does it on behalf of, and not everybody's there at the same time. That's the nature of this process. So I'm not entirely anxious about that. With regard to the, we also have I think a bit of a mismatch here in what these things attempt to do, and I just want to come back to the word that's been used here quite a lot, a filter. And the chair and I have a sort of slightly different view about this. The thing for me, a filter, is it takes things out and lets other things pass through. So it's about removing things. You know, that's what a filter does. It leaves you that impression that it takes things out. How I see this process is that we are looking at things from a different angle. And if you take any maunga you like, if you stand in the north and you look at it one way, it has this perspective. You go to the south and you stand and you look at it, it has a completely different perspective. And every angle you look at it, it is different. The maunga hasn't changed, it's just our location has changed. So on a very lot of these things, it's a matter of the vantage point you look at them is a difference. It's not that it's a filtering, it's just you're standing and looking at it from a different perspective. And so what we've got things happening here is from different perspectives. They're not trying to shut one out. So the view that you have for the maunga for the south does not invalidate at all the view you have when you look at it from the north. It's just different. It's your position of it. And we've just got to get used to, we are in this space, you're going to be from time to time looking at things from a different perspective. And one is not more valid than the other, one doesn't cancel out the other. We just have to accept that we do look at things differently from time to time.
I think the other issue in terms of lack of clarity is the measures in terms of how we actually make our decisions are not clear. And what the point that Jenny's making is that, you know, this RPC was put together so that both groups could identify how we're going to measure success. Like for me, I would like to see there's this table in terms of outstanding water bodies. I would like to see another table, degraded water bodies, and then we can actually get our focus on where we really need to be working.
Hey, look, we've overrun this, and Jenny, I understand your thinking, and also I have strong sympathy for James and Tom's point of view here. But we've got a mover and we've got a seconder. Do you wish to speak?
I just want to make it clear, Mr. Chair, that the RRMP is a substantial cornerstone document of the organisation. What we've had is an effectiveness review which has continued to tell us there are deficiencies in our measurement process, and I appreciate that that's on a timetable and it may be defaulted, or the outcome may be on a catchment basis. That's fine, but I come back to, I think, the point I'm making, and I think Jenny is also making, we just need line of sight on what that looks like. So if we are defaulting to the tank outcomes, then let's say that. I think what's needed here is another table which says these are the issues. Here are the outcomes that we want to achieve. And by the way, I've been singing the song since this thing started in 2000 and keep repeating, even by way of submissions, measurement is important. And I'll read from the report. It does, however, make it difficult to conduct quantitative plan effectiveness monitoring when we don't have it. So that's what I'm saying, if we can have clear line of sight on where we're going to measure. And I have sympathy for Jenny's position on this, because I'd also like to say let's have clear line of sight on where will the cultural values be examined or the opportunities provided to do so. So I think that's all we're asking for, not a total revamp of the spreadsheet when we're going to do it, not major additional investment, but give us line of sight on when we can expect it to happen. And if it is a deferred decision, that's fine. That's what the decision we're making, we're deferring. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Fenton, do you speak? Does anyone else wish to speak? Isn't Bacon? Okay, then we're just receiving this. So all those in favour? Against? It's carried. I want to make an apology. I apologise to the committee that I thought we could do that in 10 minutes and it took us half an hour. So we now have 15 minutes for lunch.